So I met Eva at the Museum of Art and Design, where I always go upstairs to see what the youngsters are doing. Um, she had a 6 months residency, and I was immediately drawn to her work. First of all, it is compelling, very original, beautifully crafted, and a little creepy. We chatted briefly, and I thought she'd be a wonderful presenter, so I asked her if she would present at the Long Island Craft Guild General Meeting. Unfortunately, she thought it was Long Island City. That is why we're doing it on Zoom. So I would love you to meet Eva Tellier.
So my name is Eva Tellier. Thank you so much, Barbara, for the very nice presentation and your very kind words. Um, I am a sculptor. I work predominantly with ceramics that I like to combine with different craft-based mediums such as metal, fibers, but also wax carving and casting and silicone. And also different types of fibers like hair, but that's just to name a few. Um, I moved to Canada to Montreal when I was 18 to study at Concordia University to do my undergrad. So that was about 10 years ago. I went there to do a visual art program, and I was majoring in fibers and material practices. And in my last year of undergrad, I got really into making things out of clay. So then after that, I was very determined to go to a grad program to become better technically in ceramics. And that's how I came to the US in 2023. I came here to do my master's degree in ceramics at Alfred University, uh, which is a school upstate near Rochester in New York State. So like I mentioned previously, I thought I would split this talk in two. Firstly, talk about my current practice and then sort of walk you through all the things I've been doing since I started working with clay that kind of led me to this thinking conceptually and also just professionally the things that have shaped my practice. Um, so this image that you see on your screen is an install shot of a body of work I titled Antibodies. Ant/I/bodies. That was the title. The ant refers to insects, the I refers to the self and identity, and bodies to our body, our material existence. And um, this is a good image because it really shows how everything I make is part of a larger installation and part of a larger ecosystem, and they sort of all entangled in the narrative. And some of the questions I worked through while I was working and making this body of work, I was questioning how I could make every category of objects and their functionality sort of collapse so that it could also blur what is human, what is non-human, what is repulsive, what is attractive, what is soft, and what is hard. I was interested in blurring all of that. And I was also the narrative and the speculation in this was me questioning how our species as human would evolve biologically and psychically, collectively, if we embraced porosity and fluidity as a means of survival, and what this constructed immune response would look like. So this is why it's very organism looking and sort of like a cellular sort of generated creature. So this is a quote I like to read in some talks that I do because it's a very optimistic quote by this author called Paul Preciado from his book Dysphoria Mundi. Uh, Here it goes. It says, what if amongst this planetary depression, this world war, amongst the debacle of the Anthropocene, we were living through the greatest revolution of history? We're not mere witnesses of what is happening. We are the bodies through which the mutation operates and settles. The question is not to know who we are, but who we want to become. And so this quote really inspires me when I'm thinking of different mythologies I want to create to talk about contemporary times, and because it really encapsulates that idea that history doesn't happen to us, but it happens through us and through our bodies, and so the world is shaped through all of these experiences, and yeah, it really feeds my ideas around that, and I do think it's optimistic. So, and so now I'm going to dive right into my studio process, because it's so central to my practice and to my ideas, even conceptually. So during the 2 years I spent at Alfred, I was very committed to coming up with a system of making that would generate forms, that would then become sort of like a genetic code for the species that I'm trying to figure out. And I started extruding hollow coils, so tubes, and some of these are photos of the tubes and of me sort of like attaching them, slip and scoring for those who are familiar with clay processes. Um, and I called this a tubular matrix, um, which is the idea that I coil build. So it's kind of me also reinterpreting the traditional method of coiling with these hollow tubes. And these are photos of in progress and of me building a very tall piece. Um, I then carve into these tubes. So I cut and I remove a lot of material, I remove a lot of clay, which reveals a highly adorned surface with openings, and it's very open and it's sort of shifting and mutating. And that's what gives this very exoskeletal quality to the form. It has a backbone and an interior and exterior feeling to it. And this is a very cute cat that would visit me at my studio in Alfred every day, which was good company. Um, and so the tube is a technical sort of inquiry, but it also refers to that motif refers to anatomical design and also different things in nature. So the anatomical design of plants also, but it was most importantly the first material analogy I could do to connect what human design with insect-made design or natural occurrences, and in this case, insect-made design, because certain types of wasps create their nests and their homes with clay tubes, just like I do, and then they carve exit and entrances, such as the mud dauber wasp and the potter wasp, which is also usually a sign that the clay is very good quality around your house if you have these nests. And so it was just really interesting because I started building my forms with these tubes, and then I was like, I didn't invent this. This is from nature. And I always think about how we distance ourselves from the visceral qualities of nature. And in the work, I'm always trying to bring that forward. And so the wasp became a sort of character in that mythology that I'm creating. The piece on the right that you see is made out of stoneware and it's covered with beeswax, and it refers to a wasp anatomy. I titled it Hornet taille de guêpe in brackets. Taille de guêpe is a saying in French that means a wasp waist, which is a common compliment that a young, especially women, can receive, which means you look very thin, you have a wasp waist, which was kind of like a way for me to reflect upon ideas of femininity or expectation placed on female bodies, because wasps don't have waists because they don't have organs. And so I was interested in this creature that looks like it's carrying its organs on its back. And then this piece on the left is titled French Knitter, tube within a tube. It was inspired by a knitting tool that I would play with when I was a kid, called a French knitter, which is this tool that crochets a tube out of yarn. And in this case, it is knitting a synthetic hair tube. And as it was coming out of that tubular body, it was adorned and embellished with black ribbon. And so it was me reflecting upon this idea of labor and process to generate an idea of femininity. And then the tongs at the top that are playing as the hooks are made out of cast aluminum that I carved out of wax and etc. Yes. So one of the books that really inspired this body of work, inspired by insects, is Metamorphosis by Rosie Braidotti. It's a post-humanist text in which she talks about the idea of becoming as a process of that is forever evolving and that is shaped by matter and relationships. And she uses the image of the insect to talk about that because insects have a very alien form of life and they're less relatable. And so for me, it became a bit of a muse to talk about phobias, but also to talk about this transformation process and this idea of becoming. And I just love these images of insects that are breaking out of a shell of a past self and becoming a future creature. And they just have such intricate anatomies that are both so mesmerizing and repulsive at the same time. And they really are not tamed. They're one of the species that are very free and not tamed by humans. And so in my work, I like to use familiar forms or familiarity of form to make the work. So I look at furniture and architecture and technology or things that we do as humans to contrive the environment or to to adapt it to what we think is the best idea of humanity. So these furniture pieces, I like to anthropomorphize them or make them a hybrid. And this piece titled Chair et Poil / Flesh and Fur is inspired by multiple things such as female anatomy, grasshopper anatomy, and a lounge chair. And so I was thinking of this piece as the biological function and the design kind of merges. This piece is not a chair that is made to be sat in, but rather something that you would get burst out of or crawl out of. And it's made out of ceramic, casted aluminum, and real human hair. And so I like to think of my installations with the work as psychological set designs. I really love movies. I really like the idea that objects and props and sets can reveal the psychology of a character. And there's this genre of movie called the New French Extremity, horror movies that I really like, which is often body horror that is talking about gender, femininity, monstrosity, but also desire and what we consider sort of like repulsive. And those are ideas that are found in this book that I put a photo of called The Monstrous Feminine. And it's a book by Barbara Karyo. And in there, she talks about how media and our culture defines femininity as excessive and terrifying because it's too much. And so again, familiarity of form in the shapes that I make with these tubes, like a seat and or like a vessel-like organism. I like to make things ambiguous and not clear between what is it? Is it, yeah, design, or is it an organ, or is it a plant? And I've always been very maximal. I do claim myself as a maximalist in my aesthetic, and I think this really took a whole new meaning when I read this book called Ornament and Crime by Adolphe Loos. In this book, Adolphe Loos is he talks about he condemns excess and he condemns decoration and he treats it as something frivolous and superfluous and not important, and there's very sort of racist and misogynistic rhetoric around it. And so if you are interested in sort of the politics of aesthetics or why it's important to have things decorative and things that are beautifying our environments, I think that's a good text to read because it's very much celebrating austere and pure form and function, which is kind of the opposite of what I am going for. And in this book called Ornament: A Modern Perspective by James Trilling, he very well explains that, how our culture is very much a culture that condemns anything that is not productive and not functional. And yeah, I just think it's really interesting to refer to the history of decorative arts because my use of ornament is so present. And I also learned about the term cosmophobia in these books, which means the phobia of ornaments. So it is a thing to not want that. Um, and in my ornamental language, I am very inspired by Gothic codes of decorative arts. I grew up in Paris, and I think the architecture around me, the gargoyles, the cathedrals, and all of that was very influential to my attraction to multiplicity and to something based in ornamental excess, but also something that is in between the grotesque and the dainty. Um, and then, so these tiles are sort of subverting the expectations of them being ceramic tiles. They are made out of silicone, which is a material that I've been combining with ceramics more and more. And when I talk about my ornamental language, I like to call it a decorative monstrosity. So to like as a wink or a little bit of like a tongue in cheek, as we say, to this idea of the monstrous feminine, but also to the history of decorative arts. And I think silicone as a material also holds that potential to be very ambivalent and attractive, but also very repulsive. Like I often see people feeling very drawn to it, but put off by it as well. And um and it's also so fake and it's synthetic and it allows me to introduce ideas of fakery and simulation or um or this idea of reproducing something organic and that is not naturally occurring because silicone is used in medical implants and prosthetics and in anything sort of synthetic. So I like the beeswax that is organic, and I like the synthetic silicone, and I like how ceramic is clay and organic at first, and then it's fired, and then it becomes something else. And so within the ceramic sculpture, I like to extend parts of the anatomy in these different materials. And these are two good examples of how I do that. And on the one on the right, the stinger part of the grub is beeswax, and then on the other one called coma, it is silicone. And the stinger of this anatomy is soft and it's flaccid and it's not threatening. It's subverting the threat or the pain that a stinger could induce. And I like to threaten the function or subvert the function of these anatomical choices. And this is something that I am inspired by this thing that biologists call ornament and armament. Um, so within evolution, when body features evolve to become something that attracts a mate, it's called ornament. And if it's made to repulse and to be able to fight or defend themselves, it's called armament. And so within the work, I follow that logic as well. All the materials you see on this slide, the steel, the forged steel, the casted aluminum, the hair, the silicone, all of these are sort of things that refer to how we as humans, we do that as well to defend or ourselves or attract with our hair, with our clothes, with our piercings, tattoos, like all of these adornment strategies. And so within that oh, and I forgot to mention on this one, on the stinger that is beeswax, there's acrylic nails that are used as claws. So for us, acrylic nails that are supposed to be very feminine and here become something that is very threatening. And I like to think about that a lot. Like in that same reflection, I made this piece called Swamp Pleasers, which are inspired by sort of the classic platform stripper shoe. And I was thinking about this as a sort of technology that extends the body as a almost as a prosthetic of femininity that reshapes posture and modifies morphology. And this is all ceramic. And I also love to make these primordial stages. I like to refer to the grub, the cocoon, the pod, these like sort of containing shapes that have a lack of identification. We don't know what it contains, and I like to explore how they can open up and yeah, and what and let the viewer kind of speculate on how they can become. And these are examples of pieces where I've mixed blow-in glass and forged steel and then ceramic and steel again. Um, and yeah, the glass was a good addition because it has that transparency that ceramic doesn't. Um, and that takes me all the way back to my very first ceramic sculpture, which this piece I feel is very important to how the rest of my practice sort of panned out over the last 6 years because in this piece I really discovered my love for clay and how I indulged in the process and the repetitive like process of doing the little dots and making something kind of monstrous but also decorative. And so this was kind of the original, the OG piece as I could say. Um, this one was the second piece I made in my undergrad. I did these in a sculpture class, and I used an extruder actually to make this big intestine that I then adorned with jewelry. And I was already thinking about how can I adorn something internal and something visceral that is repulsive. And I put a detail shot of the glazing on the right because I think it's quite funny how I knew nothing about glaze and I really thought this was going to come out pink and it turned out blue and white. And so it's just nice to reflect back on how I progressed because now they are also pink. And I'm still using the tube, so it has had an influence on my process. Um, these are gelatin beads that I was making in my undergrad. I think I did mention that I was majoring in fibers and material practices back then, but I was mostly interested in biomaterials, so very fleshy um, materials that are not sort of eternal like clay, like ceramic is. And I was thinking of beading, and I threaded these gelatin beads on a string, and I was already thinking of adornment and how to make them fleshy and then COVID happened, and that kind of stopped me in my track of what I was researching in clay and in these biomaterials. And so then I rented a studio in Montreal with an artist, and I kept making things in clay until I could apply to residencies or better studios for me to explore that medium. And I went to Denmark in 2021, and I went to this residency called Guldiego. I'm probably not saying it right, but this is in Skelskor, Denmark. And there's an incredible program there where you can be a young artist in residence, work for the center, and then be hosted and have a studio space and be housed, which was amazing for me. I learned everything there. I learned about glazing and I started making these vessels that were very highly punctured and adorned and termite looking, which is interesting because I'm still very much looking at structures that look sort of naturally occurring. And I was already thinking of architectural landscapes that were sort of utopian and decentering human experience and a bit more about the organic experience. These are just photos of the booth I had during one of their festivals there. They have a clay festival every July. And so it was very special. It was my first sort of solo thing that I had where I showed ceramics. And then I came back to Montreal and I went back to the ideas of beading and um, I've always been interested in how I can innovate within my hand building techniques. So how can I find different techniques to hand build and coil build differently? So now I'm doing it with the tubes, but I did that with beading for a while, and these are examples of structures that I made like this, um, which was hard and limiting, but I decided to apply to a residency called Medalta in Alberta in Medicine Hat, and they have incredible facilities and ceramic studios that were very technical and allowed me to continue exploring that. This residency is in a restored brick factory in the historical clay district of Medicine Hat, and it was so beautiful and isolated, and it was great because I could just really focus and experiment. And this is one of the pieces I made there. It was clay that I mixed with cobalt, so it fluxed, and I was just really testing the limits of what I could build with that. And right after that, I also, during that time, I could do raku and do gas firings, which, if you're interested in that, might be a good place to look into if you want to travel to Canada. Um, and then right after that, I went straight to the Rosinski Center in Quebec, um, where I had won a prize as an undergrad. The prize was a 3-week residency, and so I was kind of hopping from place to place. I didn't have an apartment, and all I wanted to do was get better at ceramic, and I really wanted to keep exploring that beading technique. And these two pieces actually totally collapsed, and didn't work out, but I learned a lot from that. And then I went back to Denmark at that same center where we were making big outdoor sculptures for artists, and it's a great community. So again, I was just focusing on going to places where I could be housed and keep working until I could build a portfolio that was good enough to go to grad school in the US. And while I was there, it was interesting. I did totally different things. I started carving out and being more figurative and narrative. And I put a photo of this tool because it kind of changed my practice. I started carving, carving, carving. And to this day, these are the tools, the tiny tools I still use to carve out all the detail of these very exoskeletal shapes. And then I went back to Marseille after this in France for a year, where I was the studio manager of a very small community studio. And there was like 12 artists sharing that small space. And I it was a nonprofit that was also housing people that had immigration issues. So it was a really interesting place where I didn't make as ambitious work, but it really was inspiring. And I made these tiles that were more narrative and inspired by my experiences there and by Marseille. And I didn't have a lot of resources or glazes or money. And so it was kind of just me I was trying to keep making work, and I was giving these workshops to the kids for free, and that was also very inspiring. And I made pieces that were very carved out and more vessel-like. Again, I went back to the vessel. And then I got into Alfred University and moved in the fall of 2023. And that's the Binsmara Hall, the ceramic entrance. And I chose to go there because, like I said earlier, France is a lot smaller and the equipment is really much smaller. And so I was craving making large work, and the facilities at Alfred are very well known to be incredible. And so this is the kiln room, and my colleague Michelle standing next to Stephanie Haynes' sculpture in the kiln room. Um, and during my first semester, I explored this biological symmetry that is still very apparent and still present in my work. I carved out a lot, and the work was very intricate, but very different in a different way than it is now. Um, and then I made these two figures because I started to be interested in the body and making things that were in between architecture and bodies. And these two female figures were cradling vessels, and I was kind of thinking about it as two figures that were turned to stone in a post-apocalyptic landscape or something. And so that's how they were presented, and I was starting to make things that were a bit more larva-esque. And then I encountered an industrial machine that made huge tubes. And that's when I was like, okay, I want to make set design looking things. And I just went for it. I extruded these massive tubes that could make these walls that I was imagining would be like an immersive sculptural piece. And that's what I did with them, but they didn't really do that thing that I wanted it to. But it was technically something that really sort of leapt, made me do a huge leap into my technical progress. It was a really amazing learning curve to make things that big. And the experience of it is just really really fun. And then I made this installation that was very immersive, where all the where bodies and objects were sort of like dissolving into each other and being more ambiguous. And I started working with bioplastics again because bioplastics was the first material I used. I used it before clay, and that was my first way to introduce intimacy and vulnerability in the installation. More photos of the bioplastic and me walking it to the campus. And in my second year, I started making bodies that were tripodic, so three legs and defying gravity. This is kind of how I make the sculptures that look like they're floating or barely touching the ground. I have like a support underneath that I fire, and then I take off the work and it stands by itself. And I did that with these two as well. And then I graduated and I moved to New York and I got invited to do this month and a half long residency at Sculpture Space in Queens. Magda and Andrew invited me to stay in one of the studios, and it was really great to keep working after even though I was very tired. I was very excited to have a new space in New York, and I made more creatures that were very knobbly and again you can see that sort of support underneath that I'm making for it to be able to freestand. And it was part of an installation where there was this wall piece behind, and so I'm still think this was in the fall. It was exhibited at Pratt Institute during Jewelry Week, and I got invited to be part of this show because I think a lot about adornment and how we decorate ourselves as humans and how it can be for beauty, but also to repulse. And with these pieces, I experimented with putting silicone, so fleshy materials, inside the skeletal structure to sort of mimic crabs or hard shell species. Oops. And then I went to in August of 2025, I moved to the studio on the sixth floor of the Museum of Arts and Design. And and that was an incredible experience. This was my studio, and people could come in 3 days a week and they could touch the different materials that I was experimenting with, and they could ask me questions about my work and how I make it. And um, it was just really great to be able to talk to people after spending 2 years in upstate New York in a very isolated area of upstate. And before that, even in the residencies, I was very much in my own process. And so I always loved to be able to share. And I had amazing studio mates as part of my cohort. So Jae Young, who weaves horsehair, and Lindsay Liu Howard, who does food portraiture out of ceramics. And so the museum really promotes craft-based contemporary practices. So everyone has their own technique that they've sort of come up with within their medium. And in the studio, I had this pug mill. Is it? Yes, a pug mill, and that my friend let me use, and I could put a die on there and extrude tubes. So I kept iterating with that process and trying to come up with new shapes. And so I'm going to stop talking for a few seconds so that you can see the video of inside of my studio space. There was this vitrine, and people could come in, just because I think otherwise the recording stops working or something. So I'm just gonna, the video is not great, but it does give you an idea. Sorry for the wobbliness. I'm not the best filmmaker, but this gives you an idea of what the space looked like, and I had my drawings up on the wall, and I also was able to buy my own extruder that you see on the right, thanks to the support of the museum, and I could keep extruding with thinner tubes. And since I moved to New York, well, during my time at MAD, I was researching how to make things in parts and more articulated. So smaller things for obvious reasons of being in New York, but also because I really want to make smaller things. I think articulated creatures would be really interesting within that narrative that I'm constructing. So I'm still researching that very much. This is a photo of me with a kid where she was trying out the pug mill, and so having the reaction of people to the work was really great because a lot of my work is about the reaction or the, as Barbara said, it's a bit creepy, and I want to know how people feel about it, and so having every like so many different people's like views on it was amazing. It was really good research for me. This is one of the pieces I made during my time there. It's tripodic in the sense that it stands on its stinger and on the wings. It's sort of a grub in mid-mutation. And at the end of my experience at MAD, which was a couple of months ago, I moved into a new space in Sunset Park in Brooklyn with my best friend and collaborator, Joel Brodowski-Adams. He was also a fellow artist at the Museum of Art and Design, and we have been sharing this new space together. And we have two kilns, and we have a crane system to put bigger work in the kiln without breaking our backs. So that's really great, and it really helps, and it really does influence the possibilities of making work if you have yeah, just like a system to load work in the kiln. This is the piece that I'm currently working on since I've moved to my new space in the last month. Is sort of a I'm sort of inspired by a piece I had already done in the last year, but it's gonna be a lamp looking piece. And I like to think of my work as sort of creatures that are sometimes cosplaying as furniture or sort of hiding in human environments, disguised as things that look familiar. So I'm working on that again still. And I still have so much to explore with the tubes, so I'm very excited to have that research ongoing. Um, and I think this is it. I thank you so much for listening to me. I put my email at the bottom in case you have questions about anything. And yeah, I look forward to hearing your questions.
Thank you. Go ahead, Alice. And then Judy.
Your work is just fantastic, so inspiring.
Thank you so much, Alice.
I love the creepiness of it. Um, so I was wondering what is this bioplastic? What is that?
So bioplastics have come sort of been kind of in the zeitgeist a little bit just because it's a material that scientists were researching for alternatives to plastic. So like something that is biodegradable that we could potentially use as a functional plastic or for plastic bags. And so there's all this research on gelatin sort of products that can be turned into plastics. And the one I use is algae based. It's an agar-agar, which is a sort of like vegan alternative to gelatin. But it's very solid. If it's like a solution that you cook and then you can make sheets out of it. Some people are making clothes out of bioplastic. Some people are using it for design. It's very versatile. It has different qualities that I like squishy materials because it's so intimate, but it's very different from silicone. It has more references to like organic qualities, let's say, than silicone. Silicone is very much sort of like a simulation. So
And
it
how
has
do you
difference.
color it? How do
The
you,
color?
yeah, how do you add color?
So for the color, I actually use ceramic oxides. I put ceramic oxides in the bioplastic and it worked out. I
Yes, it was
did.
windy, right?
Yes, yeah. There's a lot of things I do like that where it's like ceramic is so chemistry oriented that I end up having a lot of yeah, knowledge of mixing things up and seeing how it goes, you know. I think it's kind of like a glaze. Yeah.
Does it feel mushy or cold or
Yes, it feels
slimy
mushy.
or what?
It's mushy and slimy. It's harder than it's very much like jelly. Yeah, but if you make sheets out of it, it's more elastic and it feels very much like plastic. So there's the ones you saw in the photos weren't dried out. I could have dried them out and so let the moisture come out, but I wanted the moisture. It was sort of like a more ephemeral installation. And I had to keep them in the fridge and that's why I ended up doing for my thesis show I made 210 of these silicone tiles. Um, and it was much more archival and just brought like another conceptual idea to the install that I was interested in. But yeah, bioplastic is tricky like that. It's like it's alive, so it does change form. So if you want a specific thing, it's maybe not ideal. Yeah.
Did you cast them? Were they
I
cast?
did. Yes, I make so all the other materials that I use that are casted, I always make a prototype out of clay or sculpt something out of clay, and then I usually make a plaster mold or a silicone mold, but silicone and clay aren't great friends, so it's um often a plaster mold. Or sometimes I use wax. Wax is also a good material to make molds out of. Yeah.
Did you say it was alive?
It's alive in the sense that it's like food. It's like it like it's sort of like has an expiry date. Yeah, in that way. Yeah. Which is it's really very interesting for different reasons. I think in the future I'd be interested in making more of these and seeing how they change in the space or, you know, having a bit more of that experimentation.
But people make clothes out of them, you say.
Yes, but they would dry it out, kind of like a dried fruit. You know, like sometimes paper making techniques have like vegetable, you can make paper from beetroot or from pe orange peels. So you can make like fruit leather kind of looking things. And bioplastic is similar. So it depends how you process it.
And any other, Judy, you had a question?
We only saw one drawing, but do you sketch everything or how do you start a project?
Yeah, so I draw sort of separately from my sculptural work. I started with drawing. I've always been someone who drew, so I think that's just been another side of how it's more sort of like I note down ideas, but I rarely sketch the exact thing, except if it's technically ambitious. For example, that piece that is kind of like a pod that is on three legs with the hair inside it, that one I had to sketch and engineer in a way that was much more precise because of that gravity component of clay. I just had to figure out how it could not collapse. Yeah.
Would you use AI?
I would not use AI. I feel like AI doesn't know what I want to make. It could probably come very close to what I want, but I don't think I want to boil the kettle for that. Yeah.
And also, when you have a whole installation, have you visualized the whole show, all of the pieces, or do you start with one and let it sort of evolve?
I very much think of every work as an evolution or an evolved form from the previous, or like it's kind of an iteration of the previous, and that's why I think I'm so entertained by it, you know, or so like into it. It's because it feels like an ongoing, maybe as I'm getting older or like, you know, changing, it might change a lot as well. I think it's sort of like that. It's a bit more continuous like that. And that's how they sort of relate. And I I also write a lot about how they connect to each other and how they sort of have symbiotic relationships. And so, yeah, I didn't get into all the details and stuff because it's like just, you know, it gets a bit much, but
Um,
and yes, behind me there's one that you might have recognized from the slides.
I was wondering about that black clay. I really I really like that black clay that you were using. Was that an oxide applied after the fact, or
Black clay.
some of the creatures or whatever that you call them? I
Yeah,
guess I would call them creatures.
yes.
Were black.
So the black would be either a wash that I spray, like a
Okay.
oxide wash, or it would be rubber, like black rubber, or black wax. It kind of depends. I do like to have some kind of black on most of them, so it kind of depends, but probably it's a glaze.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, some kind of surface like
It,
this one.
yeah, it looks sort of semi-matte. It looks semi-matte from
Yeah.
here.
Yes, I do. I do like when it's a bit less glossy because I think for sculpture sometimes it helps bring attention to all the carving and the relief. It's hard. I struggle with surface treatment because I spend so much time carving and sculpting. It's like sometimes hard to know what's gonna be the right finish or the right color to attract yeah.
Hmm. You know, when I look at them, I think of don't be insulted. Uh,
Yes.
I think that movie Alien. You know
Yes,
when
I get that a lot. Yeah.
yeah, when those weird things pop out of people's stomachs
Yes.
or chests or something, I think,
Yeah.
oh my God.
Well, yes, the alien set design, I think, very much has a lot of references to the internal body and a lot about the female body, which is kind of, I've read a lot of like theory about it, and I think the like death and life kind of tension, you know, like the mother's body and all of that. I think we have maybe similar, but I actually don't know Alien at all. I have not watched Alien, so it's not coming from there, but
Yeah,
definitely there's something.
you could have been a set designer.
Yes, that would be fun. I would love that.
Yeah. Oh, go ahead, Lauren. I think Lauren's got her hand up.
Yeah, hi, Eva.
Hi,
Your work is very intriguing. Um,
thank you.
I'm wondering about the mix of materials that you use. Have you found that some of the, whether it's silicone or the gelatin, if you're mixing with the clay, that some things erode more over time or don't
Mm,
last? And how do you
mhm.
feel about that? Is that part of the process? Are you
Mm, mm,
accepting
mm, mm.
or not?
Um, well, it's interesting because I've been back to my storage recently. So I saw some of these pieces after a year almost, and the steel does rust a little bit, like because I've polished it and by hand, but it looks really interesting actually. I kind of love how gross metal can look. It's a different, it really shifts from being very biomechanical to sort of like very grungy, and so I'm okay with that. I also think silicone has a very long lifespan, and ceramic doesn't erode that much. So the materials I've been using have not been in an archival sense too problematic. I think I could see things deteriorating, especially with like the natural fibers and stuff, maybe in like couple of years, I think I would see that sort of disintegrate.
Well, does the silicone attract dust? I'm wondering about that.
A little bit. It does a little bit. It's kind of like, silicone mats or, like things that you just leave there for they do attract but it's very easy like easy to clean up, so it's not so complicated like that.
Mm,
Yeah. I guess the answer to this though is I am open for it to change.
right.
Yeah.
Metamorphosis, right?
Yes, exactly. Exactly. It's cycles.
Thank you.
Do you have any outdoor installations, Ava, with these
No,
pieces?
I don't have any outdoor installations at the moment, but I am planning on doing some. And so there might be in the future. We'll see if things yeah, I think it makes sense just because of the scale and and ceramic has that power of being able to withhold a lot of temperature change and stuff. But yeah, that would be cool.
Yeah, yeah, I could see a whole park with all those critters running around in it. It'd be
That would
great.
be amazing. That would be
Yeah.
amazing.
Judy, you had something?
Assuming that you can stay in your studio,
Hmm.
are you still going to pursue residencies, or what's your future plans?
Um, I think it's in my nature to want to change a lot, but it's getting harder because I have more and more things and I accumulate more and more. And so I think now for now, at least I'm staying put a little bit. I want to stay in New York because also I have a lot more like jobs and stuff. At the time I was like working at the places and they were giving me money or like, so it was a bit easier, but now I think I would for the next year stay in New York and maybe try to apply to some opportunities in the US. There's a few places in the country that would allow me to make bigger things. I think that would be kind of the only reason. I am very happy in my studio though. I don't really feel like I want to leave because I have my best friend and a kiln. So
Wonderful.
so it's really nice. Yeah, I feel very lucky.
Anybody else out there with questions or thoughts?
Well, I have another.
Yeah.
Are you getting commissions for work?
Not so much commissions, no. Not so much. People ask me a lot, but it hasn't happened in that way. It's mostly been people who buy work that is, sales of work that they see and they want um to have, but not anything specific that someone would ask me. I think commissions are, kind of like I think some people commission something that is just your work, and I think that's kind of the best of both worlds. But sometimes people will say something of a different scale, and then I can do that, and then they just let me. That's kind of the most commission like I've had. Yeah.
Because I think some of your pieces would be really cool in a public place or an office building or
Yeah.
something.
Yeah.
They're such conversation starters.
Yes, I agree. I think they would one of my professors had told me that he really saw my work as works that would be in an interior space as sort of like uninvited, like sort of like the critters there that like the spider in the corner of your apartment that you want to get rid of. Kind of.
But wouldn't they be great in the lobby of like the Natural History
Yeah.
Museum or something
Yeah,
like that, or
that would be good.
a kids museum or something, the Long Island
Mhm.
Children's Museum or whatever.
Totally. Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah.
At the moment, I have a piece at the New Bedford Art Museum. So if you find yourself in Massachusetts, the show opens on June 4th. Yeah, the show's called Synergies. If you're in that area at some point.
Where is it?
New
What?
Bedford,
No, no. What's the name of the place it's at?
The New Bedford Art Museum.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I'm going
It's
to
like
be in
a
tomorrow. I'm going to be in Massachusetts. When does it open?
on the 4th of June. Yes, so in a couple weeks. Yeah.
How long is it up for?
Until the end of August, until the 30th of August. So there's a bit of time.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Anyone else out there?
Well, I'll ask one final question.
Yeah.
What what would be your ideal future piece or medium, or what would you like to do that you haven't done before?
Uh, I think I would really love to incorporate, like combine more metal and ceramic together and more puppet like sculptures, sort of like marionettes. So I don't know, maybe if I could collaborate with someone who is in robotics or something, I think that would be very, very fun. I also am interested in getting better at learning how to make prosthetics, so maybe like taking a course about um sort of like makeup effects or something like that. I don't know. There's a lot of things I'm interested in, but definitely having the opportunity to make something out of metal that could be an outside sculpture, I think that would be really great. Like a foundry or like either bronze or just aluminum. That would be good. Yeah.
Good luck.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, we'll see. But I mean, first things first, I want to like keep showing these pieces in different spaces. I like seeing them in different spaces. Hmm. Yeah.
Awesome.
So aluminum rusts?
It does if it doesn't have a coating or something to protect it. There's lacquers that you can um put on like sprayable sort of varnish looking things. Yeah. I'm not an expert in metal, but the little bit that I've done, I've sprayed it with a coating and that protects it. Yeah.
Well, thank you so much.
Thank you so much for listening.
A round of applause.
Thank you.